While many people assume that legendary actor Charlton Heston was as imposing in real life as he was in his iconic movies, the handsome 6'3" star's son, Fraser Heston, has recently shed some new light on his father that puts that narrative to bed. As a child watching his father take on tough guy roles, Fraser must have thought his dad was some kind of professional chariot driver. But even though Heston was one of the most sought-after leading men in Hollywood during the golden age of cinema, he made room in his busy schedule to spend quality time with those who mattered most. Fraser, in an exclusive interview he gave to Closer in early 2022, described Charlton as a devoted family man who was deeply committed to his wife of 64 years, Lydia, and his 2 children. Besides Fraser, there's another person who has nothing but praise for Charlton. That's his other child, Holly. Join us as we see what Holly and Fraser had to say about their father while taking a look back at his storied career. Facts First presents Charlton Heston's daughter confirms what we thought all along. Holly and Fraser's warm memories of their father. Charlton's children naturally were in awe of their film star father, but at home, the Planet of the Apes star showed a much softer side of himself than what audiences were used to seeing on the big screen. According to Holly and Fraser, Heston was a warm and approachable man who always put his family first. Unlike many of his colleagues, Charlton managed to strike a balance with his family, career, and activism. Since he went on to become a champion for civil rights and other causes, these things required him to display courage and conviction. People who know nothing about him, aside from his film roles, might just see him as an overly conservative and rigid Old Testament kind of guy. But according to Fraser, despite his political leanings, he wasn't that sort of man at all. To him, Charlton was a loving, engaging, and funny guy. Lydia, Fraser, and Holly saw Charlton's gentler side, and to them it was this aspect of his character that was the greatest source of heroism. Fraser lauded Charlton as a very patient father, while Holly told Closer that her father valued quality time. Whenever he was with her, he was completely with her. He could have easily allowed himself to get caught up in his work and lose focus on domestic matters. But to Charlton, his craft as an actor was only a means to an end. It was the way he was able to support his family, and the last thing he was going to allow to happen was falling off that path. Both children knew Charlton was devoted to their mother. They'd been college sweethearts who pounced at the first opportunity they had to get married in 1944. During the Second World War, Charlton served his country as an aerial gunner. Throughout the war, there was only one woman he thought about back home, Lydia. They remained by each other's side right up until the end. Towards the final years of his life, Charlton was quoted as saying he wouldn't even be himself if it wasn't for Lydia. But it wasn't just his family that made him the man he was. It was those distinct, uncompromising convictions that Charlton held that helped mold his character. He marched on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial with the venerable Dr. Martin Luther King during the Civil Rights Movement. He knew there was so much at stake, and it was crucial for him to take a stand, even when it wasn't popular to do so. But then again, being unpopular was never something that worried Charlton. Even when his support for the National Endowment for the Arts was at odds with his buddy Ronald Reagan, and his status as the president of the National Rifle Association drew criticism from gun control advocates, he never backed down from his convictions. He once said, "I wish for you the courage to be unpopular, as courage is history's true currency." Never in his life did he display any cowardice, nor could anyone accuse him of lacking heart. During the Vietnam War, he did 3 tours to visit troops on the front lines. When he returned home, he would make it his duty to call all of their loved ones to let them know they were okay. Fraser told Closer, quote, "You'd think after serving in World War II, someone would receive a get-out-of-public-service-free card, but Charlton never saw it that way. He was devoted to helping others, even when that put a strain on his time and energy." Even when he was stricken with Alzheimer's disease, before dying at 84 in 2008, Holly said her dad faced his illness with dignity and grace. She added there weren't any empty buckets on his bucket list, and felt as though he had so much richness in his life. Sophia Loren drove Charlton Heston crazy. While Charlton's children had nothing but praise and words of admiration for their father, apparently he didn't get along with everyone. The Hollywood tough guy reportedly refused to make eye contact with his co-star Sophia Loren during their famous lovemaking scene in El Cid. For the film's big death scene, Heston later claimed he had instead been looking off into the future rather than facing Loren. Even critics noticed this in their reviews. While most men, actors or otherwise, would have been overjoyed to spend time with Loren, Heston was not impressed by her looks or talent. The world was going gaga over her in 1960, and she seemed to have set Hollywood ablaze after signing a 5-film contract with Paramount in 1956. But Charlton saw this as merely a facade. Loren appeared in starring roles opposite heavyweights like Clark Gable, Frank Sinatra, and Cary Grant. She had made a name for herself with powerful performances in films like It Happened in Naples, Houseboat, and The Millionaires. She was even the first person to win an acting Oscar for a non-English language film for her performance in Two Women. So what didn't Heston like about her? Going into El Cid, Heston was already a major film star, just like her. In 1959, he had taken home an Oscar for his performance in Ben-Hur. Since he had been the director's first choice for the leading role, he felt a sense of responsibility and ownership over his involvement with the El Cid project. When Loren was brought on board, however, she was also famous and widely acclaimed, so she felt equally opinionated and strong-willed over the film. She started throwing around demands. Apparently, she wanted the script to be rewritten with more romantic scenes involving her character. In addition, she only agreed to film for between 8 and 10 weeks, so the movie's filming schedule had to be reworked to accommodate her. On top of that, she insisted on being paid a fortune. Some reports claim she made $1 million for the role, while others give a more conservative estimate of $200,000. Either way, she was getting more than Heston. Not only that, but Loren began throwing around her weight, making all sorts of absurd demands, such as insisting that the film script be translated into Italian, then back to English that she was more comfortable using. In time, Heston grew tired of Loren's princess-like attitude. Things got so uncomfortable on set, he demanded a stand-in body double take on his place in close-up scenes that only showed Loren's mug. As the shoot continued and the situation deteriorated, the film's director, Anthony Mann, struggled to get Heston to look at Loren at all. This sticky situation wasn't the first time Heston butted heads with one of his co-stars, because back on the set of Cecil B. DeMille's masterpiece biblical epic The Ten Commandments, Yul Brynner fought tooth and nail not to get upstaged by his alpha male co-star. Heston was cast as Moses, while Brynner was selected to play the Pharaoh Ramses. The 6'3" Charlton towered over Yul, who stood at 5'7". But Brynner wasn't going to let that height disparity lead to him being overshadowed. After learning that Ramses would be shirtless for the majority of the film, he took on a serious weightlifting regimen to get cut. But he also successfully earned Heston's respect. Though they may have been rivals at one point, the Moses actor later was quoted as saying that his co-star gave the best performance of the film. Charlton may be one of the most famous Hollywood tough guys of all time, but his children have shown us he was also a devoted family man who would have given anything to see his loved ones happy. History hasn't painted the stars of yesteryear in the most flattering light, especially the men, but Charlton was apparently cut of a different cloth. He was a man of values, courage, and uncompromising convictions. Now it's time to hear from you. Did you know that Charlton Heston marched with MLK Jr.? Let us know in the comments section below.